Although then and now, I have always understood that I served at the pleasure of the President, I still find it difficult to comprehend that foreign and private interests were able to undermine U.S. interests in this way.
It was a big day on Capitol Hill. We're talking all about the proceedings and what's to come. My guests, Professor and Dean Stephen Maynard Caliendo, Professor Bill Buck, both from North Central College, still with us. So, by the way, let me pick up on where the ambassador left off. You know, the president has immense power, and Adam Schiff made the point. It's not unlimited. It's immense, but it's not absolute. Do you think people get that? Because the Republican talking point here is, hey, he can fire you. He really doesn't need a reason. You don't need to know a reason. He just wants to fire you, and that's the way it is. Or when it's done for improper purposes. Does that matter, Stephen?
Yeah, the improper part matters. What he did wasn't wrong. In other words, wasn't improper, wasn't illegal. He can fire an ambassador. He can replace an ambassador. But if there are real questions as to the motives of why he did it that have to do with high crimes and misdemeanors, it's certainly with Congress's responsibility to investigate that, and that's what they're up to. So this argument that he shouldn't even be asking these questions because he can do whatever he wants, well, he can't do whatever he wants if it's outside the law. But certainly people do serve at the president's pleasure.
Bill, we're also hearing a lot about the whistleblower. We still hear the Republicans saying, bring in the whistleblower, as though it's some dastardly thing the Democrats are doing from keeping this whistleblower away. First of all, the whistleblower gets protected. Isn't that what the whistleblower statute is all about, is protecting the whistleblower?
Right. The idea here is that this law protects somebody who observes something within government, can report it, and then is guaranteed protection from that. So
now,
absolutely.
in fairness, what Republicans say to that, because I want to be thorough about that, what Republicans say is, look, yes, they're protected from retribution. You can't be fired. Nothing can happen. But the statute doesn't say we don't get to know who you are.
Sure.
So do the Republicans have a point?
I think they have a political point. So they can continue to hammer at this whistleblower, and they may gain some political points for that. At the end of the day, Adam Schiff feels like he's got enough other individuals to come forward and testify and corroborate the count that he probably doesn't need the whistleblower. But if that tends to work, if the Democrats feel like they're losing leverage here, they absolutely could bring the whistleblower in.
And I'm just curious, Stephen, I mean, it's almost as though the Republicans, with very loud voices, make their points, and then you have to kind of search through the Democrats' response to hear it. Why aren't the Democrats strongly saying, you don't need the whistleblower? The whistleblower announced things second and third hand. We're bringing you the people who the whistleblower was talking about. It's all affirmed. Why don't they make that as a strong point?
It is a strong point, but this is a longer process. It's not a sprint. It's not a marathon either, but it's sort of a mid-distance run. And I think that they're going to get to that as they move closer. And these are arguments that they would make after impeachment during the trial in the Senate. I mean, this is sort of a building. The other thing they really don't need is the quid pro quo, right? I mean, I think that there's lots of evidence that it was there, whether or not the president said it's not a quid pro quo and then described a quid pro quo and said we have to have this. But asking a foreign government to interfere in our elections is problematic in its own right and illegal in its own right, right? So even if there wasn't a, I'll give you something else, even if he had not withheld the congressionally approved aid, saying, hey, I'd like you to do this for me, help me understand what Hunter Biden might have done, because then I'll be able to use this, and, right? Then that's enough of a problem in and of itself.
So next week we have 8 people testifying, and one of whom is Ambassador Sondland. And I'm going to have a bowl of popcorn with me on that one. Because Sondland, who has said things, had to come back, correct things. Now there's more statements he was part of. He's got to correct things. Is there a concern, do you think, that Sondland doesn't even show up, or do you think he's just meeting with lawyers and trying to figure out how to handle this?
I think he's likely to show up. I think he's worried about going to jail right now, right? And what's interesting with him is that he revised his testimony after remembering it, and I think he revised his testimony because he realized there were so many other people contradicting his account that he could get himself in trouble. Now what we've seen from some within the Trump administration, they're starting to throw him under the bus. So what I'm watching for next week is how, not only what he says in testimony, but then how the Trump administration responds to that. Are they going to try to attack him? It's hard to say he's a never-Trumper because he gave $1 million to the administration, right? So he is closely aligned with that administration.
And very briefly, Stephen, so we don't get Rudy Giuliani, we don't get John Bolton, and we have Republicans saying, you're not bringing us first-hand people, or Mick Mulvaney, right. But the White House isn't letting them take the stand.
No, that's true. And I think in some ways that even though Giuliani's another one who possibly could get thrown under the bus at some point in this process, partly because the president could then pardon him, right? And so I think that there might be an opportunity there strategically to figure out there's got to be a fall guy, and Giuliani was in all the negotiations in a sort of in a kind of a quasi-official capacity, right, negotiating with the Ukrainians. And so he might also be a person that gets the fall.
It's fascinating stuff. We'll continue to watch it next week. Dean Stephen Maynard Caliendo and Professor Bill Buck, give him a raise after this. Thanks for being with me.